In this particular lecture, let's go ahead and calculate the monthly sum, the weekly sum, so on and so forth. So in order to calculate the sum across the specific days, we actually need to consider the dates on which the expenses were made. So for example, let's say if you have to find out the expenses made in the last 7 days, in that particular case, you have to go back to the date of the last 7 days, consider all of those expenses on that particular date, and then sum them up together. And in order to do that, we need to find the difference between the current dates and the dates of the expenses which we have up over here. So we already have those dates, but now the question is, how exactly would you find differences between the dates? So we will be able to do that when we make use of the date time object. And the date time object is going to help us to calculate the difference between, or the number of days between the current day and that expense date. So let's go ahead and implement that. So first of all, I'll go ahead and import date time here inside views. So I would say import date time. And for now, let's say you want to calculate the expenses which are made in the last, let's say 365 days or a year. So in order to calculate that, you have to go inside this index view and you have to go after the total expenses. And it's actually better if you delete this. And now I would add a comment here saying logic to calculate 365 days expenses. Okay, and here what we currently do is that first of all we get the current date time for today. So we make use of the date time object. So we say date time dot date dot, and we want today's date, so we say today. So this kind of gives us access to the existing date, and we want to go back to the date for the past 365 days. So I say date time dot time delta. Time delta basically means we want to go back a couple days and we want to go back 365 days. So I would say 365. And the difference is going to give us the entire last 365 days, which is nothing but, let's say, last year. So I would say last underscore year equals this. Now, once we have the expenses or all the expenses in our database, we kind of make use of this last year to find out expenses which were actually made greater than last year, which is the current year. So here we say expense dot objects dot filter, and we want to filter out the expenses, and we want to say that the date is double underscore GT. GT means greater than, and we want the date greater than the last year which we have just calculated, which means the last 365 days. And then this is going to give us access to all the objects which follow this particular condition. So let's save those particular objects into a variable called as data. And now what we do is that once we have all of those expenses, that is the expenses made in the last 365 days, we kind of go ahead and perform the same kind of aggregation as we have performed here. So here we have said expenses.aggregate sum the amount, and we are going to be doing the same thing over here as well. So here I'll paste it up over here, and instead of saying expenses, now we want to make that query on the data. So I would say data equals this. Now this is going to give us the sum of expenses across a year, and therefore I'm going to save it into a variable called as yearly sum. So yearly sum equals this. Now once we have this yearly sum, you simply have to pass in yearly sum as context over here. But even before that, let's actually try printing it up and let's see the kind of result we would get. So print yearly sum, and once we do that, we are pretty much good to go. So now let's go back here. Let's make a get request. And if we go to the terminal, I should be able to get the yearly sum, which is this. And the yearly sum is going to be the same because all the expenses which we have made actually are in the same month. Now, if you actually want to check if this thing is working correctly, what you could do is that we have expenses across, I guess, 3 days. So let's actually minimize it to, let's say 1. And let's see the kind of result we would get. So if I say days equals 1, if I make a get request again, and if I go to the terminal now, as you can see, it only gives us expense for today, which is $123,000, which is this expense right here. Now, in order to again make another check, I would change the days to 2. And this time if I go back here and make a get request, I should be able to get the $333 plus this expense. So if I go to the terminal, as you can see, that's exactly what we get here. That means this logic of actually calculating the expense across different days is working. So here I could say 365. So that kind of gives us data for 365 days. If I want to calculate the same kind of expenses over the past 30 days, I could make use of the same logic here. So I could delete this, copy this entire snippet of code, paste it up over here. Let's calculate it for 30 days now. And instead of saying last year, I would say last month. This is going to be the same. The only thing that's going to change is, let's change the number of days to 30. This is going to be the same. This is going to change to last month. This is going to change to monthly sum. And the same thing could be done to calculate the weekly expenses as well. So here I'll again copy the same thing, change it to 7 days. Change this thing to, let's say, last week. This is going to be 7 days instead of 30. This is also going to be changed to last week as well. And this is going to change to weekly sum. Okay, so now once we have this, now we simply go ahead, take all of these objects which we have here and kind of pass those objects here just as we have passed in the total expenses. So here we pass in yearly sum, monthly sum, and weekly sum. So let's do that real quick. So I would say yearly sum, pass it as context, yearly sum. Do the same thing with weekly sum, weekly underscore sum as weekly sum, and then finally we have the monthly sum. So monthly sum is going to be, let's say, monthly sum. Okay, so now once we have passed this context, we could finally go ahead, retrieve all of that context and display that up over here inside the index.html. But we are not going to simply display that just as it is. Instead, we are actually going to create a card-like format to display the expenses across different days. So let's learn how to do that in the next one.